public safety, national security. Governments invoke both because they are core missions and because they can be used to defend measures that, absent true threats to public safety or national security, a free society might reject or oppose. The Trump administration has used both terms to defend aggressive internal immigration enforcement. Moreover, it has used harsh rhetoric to describe people who have protested or in any way interfered with enforcement actions. In some cases, this administration has brought federal charges, alleging that violent crimes have been committed against agents, and even saying those offenses may have justified the use of lethal force. In this context, something very important happened today. Federal charges of violence against immigration agents lodged against two Venezuelan immigrants stemming from an incident on January 4th, where one of the immigrants was shot after agents accused them of using shovels as weapons. Well, those charges have now been dropped with prejudice, meaning they can never be brought again. Then something else happened. Todd Lyons, the acting director of ICE, said two ICE agents may have lied about that incident, the one that led to the federal charges being filed. Those two agents were placed on administrative leave. Lyons said in a statement, and I quote, "Lying under oath is a serious federal offense. The officers may face termination of employment, as well as potential criminal prosecution," end quote. This is a significant reversal. How significant? Well, by way of comparison, this is what DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said about the incident that led to the charges against the Venezuelans.
Our ICE agents are following the law and running their operations according to training. Last night, what we saw was three individuals weaponize shovels and brooms and attack an ICE officer that had to defend himself. But I would say that our agent is beat up, he's bruised, he's injured, he's getting treatment, and we're thankful that he made it out alive.
None of that in reference to this January 14th incident appears to be true. Lawyers for both migrants welcomed the dismissal of charges and said acknowledgement of misstatements was equally welcome. Situations can become confused for law enforcement, and it's worth noting that that work carries risks that no reasonable person can overlook or dismiss. But blanket assertions and snap judgments carry risks of their own and can intensify a sense of fear among law enforcement that can take on a danger of its own. The cases of Renee Good, whose death preceded by 7 days the encounter with the Venezuelans, and Alex Preddy, whose death occurred 10 days later, vividly underscore this inherent peril. That's why this moment matters, because it may herald a potentially new dimension of immigration enforcement, where there is accountability on both sides of the ledger. We begin with our Camilo Montoya-Galvez in New York and Nicole Sganga here with me at the desk. Camilo, let me start with you. Remind our audience of what this was all about on January 14th.
Good evening, Major. That is completely right. In mid-January, a week after the killing of Minneapolis resident Renee Good, when tensions were really high in that region of the country, the Department of Homeland Security issued a sweeping and categorical statement accusing 3 Venezuelan men, including one who was shot by an ICE officer, of, quote, violently assaulting law enforcement with a shovel and a broom handle in an attempt to evade arrest and obstruct law enforcement. Subsequently, the Justice Department moved to charge criminally 2 of the men on allegations that they impeded the ICE officer and also assaulted him. But earlier this week, as you underscored, the Justice Department moved to dismiss and drop those charges, citing newly discovered evidence that it says is materially inconsistent with the initial allegations made against the 2 Venezuelan men. And now today, acting ICE Director Todd Lyons, who rarely issues statements with his name on them, is saying that video of the incident shows and indicates that the 2 officers involved in the incident made false statements or appeared to have lied during sworn testimony about the case. In addition to being suspended, the 2 officers are now under investigation criminally and also potentially by ICE on an administrative basis, Major. And after that process concludes, Lyons says that the officers could be terminated completely from ICE and also potentially criminally prosecuted. So it is a way for ICE right now, amid growing discontent with the agency's actions, to project the message that it is trying to hold people accountable inside the agency who are alleged to have engaged in misconduct. Major.
Nicole, you were in Minneapolis. Camilo referred to how tense things were. You experienced that firsthand. But what happened in this case is not an isolated incident. There have been other instances where charges have been leveled in this context and then later dropped.
Yeah, we saw the same thing, and I was on the ground in Minnesota, but also on the ground during Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago when Marimar Martinez was shot 5 times. She was accused by the federal government in a court of law of assaulting federal law enforcement, and later those charges were dropped, very similar to what we see here with Operation Metro Serve, and charges dropped against these 2 Venezuelan men who were the targets of this immigration operation. Multiple recent cases involving federal immigration agents' use of force have seen charges fall apart, or they've been reevaluated when evidence didn't support the government's initial claim. And it raises questions about how some of these operations, Major, are being justified. And it is the reason that during a hearing on Capitol Hill yesterday, we heard from a Republican, Senator Rand Paul, who grilled top DHS officials about credible investigations into Alex Preddy and Renee Good. And he said, quote, "Nobody believes you're going to because you made conclusions immediately."
And Camilo, to this point, it has been said by critics of these aggressive interior enforcement actions that until now, or until very recently, ICE and DHS have basically said, not that we're unaccountable, but they're not interested in allegations of potential wrongdoing. This suggests a reevaluation of that.
Yeah, and it also goes to show, Major, that the administration has been facing increasing and escalating political pressure on immigration enforcement during the 2024 presidential campaign. And early on in his administration, President Trump's mass deportation agenda was, on a net basis, supported by a majority of Americans. Now, it is deeply unpopular in many sectors of the country, especially when it comes to questions around tactics and also the strategy that ICE and Border Patrol agents are employing across the country. And there are also questions about, like Nicole underscored, the actual credibility and also accuracy of the statements that the Department of Homeland Security is putting out, and that top administration officials like Secretary Noem, Border Patrol Commander official Gregor Vivino are making in really high-stakes situations, including after the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Border Patrol agent Vivino even said at one point during a nationally televised press conference that Preddy was trying to massacre federal agents without citing any evidence and before a full investigation was underway. And that statement was directly contradicted hours later by video of the incident, witness statements, and later, subsequently, by a government report. So this is part of a broader trend that the administration is facing, and it seems that they are now recognizing that some of these actions and statements are becoming too politically toxic. And I think the decision to stop the operation in Minneapolis is a recognition of that, Major.
And Nicole, very quickly, quite separate from the politics, when an announcement like the acting director of ICE, Todd Lyons, makes today sends a signal to others who are doing this work.
These agents were not just placed on administrative leave. There is a criminal probe that has been opened with potential for prosecution, Major, and that is different than what we've seen in the past. That is a signal to every man and every woman in uniform that you are not operating with impunity.
Nicole Sganga, Camilo Montoya-Galvez, thank you so very much for starting us off tonight. I really appreciate it.